There is one reality in life, and that is death. It is the great equalizer. The rest is a distraction. What have you done to prepare for it? Do you really know where you have come from and to where you are really going? To all who come to see and hear of this documentary, let it be known that our fight is not with any group of people. Our fight is with Satan himself, who has successfully deceived the world into going astray. For it has become ever so evident that most people have no clue not only of who is God, but also who is Satan. This message of truth is a final warning to all people, to the Jewish, the Christian, the Muslim, the Hindu, the Buddhist, and even to the atheist. This is a final warning to all of humanity. If you are like most people in the world, who refuse to search and examine the truth of their religion from the very own scriptures with a clear mind, then I strongly urge you to turn away now. For this presentation is clearly not for you. It is those with the courage to accept the truth, who have the wisdom and understanding to question the clergy. You will embark on new understanding to the Torah, Gospel, and Quran, which has never been revealed before in the history of humanity, which amazingly matches the true prophecies of Enoch and Idris, and seriously exposes the false teachings of the clergy and the scholars. It is those whose names have been written in the book of life before the creation of the world that will come to accept and believe this message.
The tragic truth about the Ten Commandments. It is important to note, my dear brothers and sisters, that God spoke indeed to Moses as affirmed in Exodus 3 verse 14 and Surah 4 164. And we sent messengers about whom we had related their stories to you before, and messengers about whom we have not related to you. And Allah spoke to Moses with direct speech.
When we closely zoom in on the text of Exodus 3 verse 14, God said to Moses, "I am who I am." This is what you are to say to the Israelites. "I am has sent me to you." We discover once again the traces of the Arabic language, for the words "I am who" translates to "Ana huwa" in Arabic. And when the sons of Israel used to call out to him, they would call him Yahuwah, which became commonly known as Yahweh in the so-called Old Testament.
Exodus 19 verses 3 to 8. While Moses went up to God, the Lord called to him from the mountain. "This is what you should say to Jacob's household and declare to the Israelites. You saw what I did to the Egyptians, and how I lifted you up on eagle's wings and brought you to me. So now, if you faithfully obey me and stay true to my covenant, you will be my most precious possession out of all the peoples, since the whole earth belongs to me. You will be a kingdom of priests for me and a holy nation. These are the words you should say to the Israelites. Call together the people's elders and set before them all these words that the Lord had commanded him." The people all responded with one voice, "Everything that the Lord has said, we will do." Moses reported to the Lord what the people said. Exodus 20. The Ten Commandments, my dear brothers and sisters, way before Moses went up the mountain for 40 days and nights. Beware, some of the following commandments have been tampered with, and some are missing from the list. Exodus 20, 20-7. Then God spoke all these words. "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You must have no other gods before me. Do not make an idol for yourself, no form whatsoever of anything in the sky above, or on the earth below, or in the waters under the earth. Do not bow down to them or worship them, because I, the Lord, your God, am a passionate God. I punish children for their parents sins, even to the third and fourth generation. Brothers and sisters, we already know this above sentence is corrupted, as proven earlier in the previous documentary, in Ezekiel 18 verse 4 and 25. Of those who hate me, but I am loyal and gracious to the 1000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. Do not use the Lord your God's name as if it were of no significance. The Lord won't forgive anyone who uses his name that way. Remember the Sabbath and treat it as holy. 6 days you may work and do all your tasks, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. Do not do any work on it, not you, your sons or daughters, your male or female servants, your animals, or the immigrant who is living with you. Because the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and everything that is in them in 6 days. But, as we know, it was Adam and not God that rested on the 7th. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and mother, so that your life will be long on the fertile land that the Lord your God has given you. Brothers and sisters, take a look at the following. Do not kill. The missing text to this, my brothers and sisters, is found in Exodus 21, verses 12 to 14. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not testify falsely against your neighbour. Do not desire your neighbour's house. Do not desire and try to take your neighbour's wife, male or female servant, ox, donkey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbour. When all the people witnessed the thunder and lightning, the sound of the horn, and the mountain smoking, the people shook with fear and stood at a distance. They said to Moses, "You speak to us, and we will listen, but don't let God speak to us, or we'll die." Moses said to the people, "Don't be afraid, because God has come only to test you and to make sure you are always in awe of God, so that you don't sin." The people stood at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness in which God was present. Take special note, my dear brothers and sisters, of the following text that confirms not only did Moses stay in a cloud above the mountain for 40 days and nights in Exodus 24 verse 18. Then Moses entered the cloud as he went up the mountain. But that God had clearly given him instructions with the 10 commandments he gave him on the stone tablets. In Exodus 24 verse 12. The Lord said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and stay here, and I will give you the tablets of stone with the law and commandments. I have written for them instruction." Listen carefully, my dear brothers and sisters. The laws just did not come down on their own as simple and plain sentences. They came with clear instructions and from God, as affirmed in all of the following. The damning evidence, my dear brothers and sisters, that we are about to produce is the missing instructions to the law and commandments, which first appeared in Exodus 20, as well as the missing commandments that have been maliciously hidden from us by the Pharisees and the Antichrist church through the Romans. Please note, commandments are in no particular order. The 10 Commandments. We find the missing instructions to the above commandments of Exodus 20 verse 1 to 8 deliberately hidden in Exodus 20 verses 23 to 26. Do not make for yourselves gods of silver or gold to be worshipped in addition to me. Take a look at some of the silver and gold gods that mankind has worshipped instead of the one true God. Here's a picture of statue of Mary, of Hamana, a gold statue. Exodus 23:24. Make an altar of earth for me, and on it sacrifice your sheep and your cattle as offerings to be completely burned, and as fellowship offerings. In every place that I set aside for you to worship me, I will come to you and bless you. Take special note, my dear Catholic brothers and sisters, of the next two commandments which the Church has clearly disobeyed. Exodus 25 and 26. If you make an altar of stone for me, do not build it out of cut stones, because when you use a chisel on stones, you make them unfit for my use. Take a look, my dear brothers and sisters, at the altars of the Church that are clearly chiseled out of cut stone in defiance to God's command. Exodus 23:26. Do not build an altar for me with steps leading up to it. I'll repeat, do not build an altar for me with steps leading up to it. If you do, you will expose yourselves as you go up the stairs. Take a look, my dear brothers and sisters, at the steps that are built leading to the altar in clear defiance of God's command. How many generations of priests and altar boys, including me previously, have exposed themselves? Exodus 22 verse 20. Condemn to death anyone who offers sacrifices to any god except me, the Lord. In Exodus 23 verse 13, listen to everything that I, the Lord, have said to you. Do not pray to other gods. Do not even mention their names. In Exodus 23, 20 to 33. I will send an angel ahead of you to protect you as you travel and to bring you to the place which I have prepared. Pay attention to him and obey him. Do not rebel against him, for I have sent him, and he will not pardon such rebellion. But if you obey him and do everything I command, I will fight against all your enemies. My angel will go ahead of you and take you into the land of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will destroy them. Do not bow to their gods or worship them, and do not adopt their religious practices. Destroy their gods and break down their sacred stone pillars. If you worship me, the Lord your God, I will bless you with food and water, and take away all your sicknesses. In your land, no woman will have a miscarriage or be without children. I will give you long lives. I will make the people who oppose you afraid of me. I will bring confusion among the people against whom you fight, and I will make all your enemies turn and run from you. I will throw your enemies into panic. I will drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites as you advance. I will not drive them out within a year's time. If I did, the land would become deserted, and the wild animals would be too many for you. Instead, I will drive them out little by little, until there are enough of you to take possession of the land. I will make the borders of your land extend from the Gulf of Aqaba to the Mediterranean Sea, and from the desert to the Euphrates River. I will give you power over the inhabitants of the land, and you will drive them out as you advance. Do not make any agreement with them or with their gods. Do not let those people live in your country. If you do, they will make you sin against me. If you worship their gods, it will be a fatal trap for you. And in Exodus 34 verses 11 to 16, obey the laws that I am giving you today. I will drive out the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites as you advance. Do not make any treaties with the people of the country into which you are going, because this could be a fatal trap. Instead, tear down their altars, destroy their sacred pillars, and cut down their symbols of the goddess Asherah. Here are some verses about the commandment. Beware of corrupted verses, such as verse 2. Do not worship any other god, because I, the Lord, tolerate no rivals. Once again, do not make any treaties with the people of the country, because when they worship their pagan gods and sacrifice to them, they will invite you to join them, and you will be tempted to eat the food they offer to their gods. Your sons might marry those foreign women who would lead them to be unfaithful to me and to worship their pagan gods. Here again are some damning examples of God's punishments on those who serve other gods. Knowing too well that our great God does not speak vaguely, as we have clearly demonstrated in the above commandment, we can see, feel and sense the absolute reality that God condoned the act of killing, my dear brothers and sisters. And we know too well, when we get to the commandment of Exodus 20 verse 13, where it vaguely states, do not kill, that there is something seriously missing from the text. For our God is never vague, but clearly black or white, as we have repeatedly demonstrated throughout our postings. So when we go in search of the missing text to Exodus 20 verse 13, we find it cunningly hidden in the text of Exodus 21 verses 12 to 36. I encourage everyone to listen and look carefully. Laws about violent acts. Anyone who strikes a man and kills him shall surely be put to death. However, if he does not do it intentionally, but God lets it happen, he is to flee to a place I will designate. We can see a great example of the above instruction, my dear brothers and sisters, in Exodus 2 verses 11 to 16, where Moses did not intentionally mean to kill someone, as we can see examples in Deuteronomy 19, 1 to 10, Joshua 20, 1 to 9, and Numbers 35, 11 to 12. Moving on. But if a man schemes and kills another man deliberately, take him away from my altar and put him to death. Whoever hits his father or his mother is to be put to death. Whoever kidnaps someone, either to sell him or to keep him as a slave, is to be put to death. Whoever curses his father or his mother is to be put to death. The latest instruction is clearly tampered with, as we have the disciple James cursing people in the last half of James 3 verse 9. For all we know, some of those people the disciples were cursing could well have been their own parents. If there is a fight and someone hits someone else with a stone or with his fist, but does not kill him, he is not to be punished. If the one who was hit has to stay in bed, but later is able to get up and walk outside with the help of a cane, the one who hit him is to pay for his lost time and take care of him until he gets well. If a slave owner takes a stick and beats his slave, whether male or female, and the slave dies on the spot, the owner is to be punished. But if the slave does not die for a day or two, the master is not to be punished. The loss of his property is punishment enough. If some men are fighting and hurt a pregnant woman so that she loses her child, but she is not injured in any other way, the one who hurt her is to be fined whatever amount the woman's husband demands, subject to the approval of the judges. But if the woman herself's injured, the punishment shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. If someone hits his male or female slave in the eye and puts it out, he is to free the slave as payment for the eye. If he knocks out a tooth, he is to free the slave as payment for the tooth. The responsibility of owners. If a bull gores someone to death, it is to be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but its owner is not to be punished. But if the bull had been in the habit of attacking people, and its owner had been warned, but did not keep it penned up, then if it gores someone to death, it is to be stoned, and its owner is to be put to death also. However, if the owner is allowed to pay a fine to save his life, he must pay the full amount required. If the bull kills a boy or girl, the same rule applies. If the bull kills a male or female slave, its owner shall pay the owner of the slave 30 pieces of silver, and the bull shall be stoned to death. If someone takes the cover off a pit, if he digs one and does not cover it, and a bull or a donkey falls into it, he must pay for the animal. He is to pay the money to the owner and may keep the dead animal. If someone's bull kills someone else's bull, the two of them shall set the live bull and divide the money. They shall also divide up the meat from the dead animal. But if it was known that the bull had been in the habit of attacking, and its owner did not keep it penned up, he must make good the loss by giving the other man a live bull, but he may keep the dead animal. As we can clearly ascertain from all of the damning evidence above, my dear brothers and sisters, our great God did not use a 3-word sentence as a commandment. All of the above is further consolidated in Surah 5 verse 32. Because of that, we decreed upon the children of Israel that whoever kills a soul, unless for a soul or for corruption done in the land, it is as if he had slain mankind entirely. And whoever saves one, it is as if he had saved mankind entirely. And our messengers had certainly come to them with clear proofs. Then indeed many of them, even after that, throughout the land, were transgressors. For the most part of my 43 years of my life, I was too deceived into believing that God only stated the words, "Do not kill," and nothing else. How naive I was. It is evident now, more than ever before, why the devil, through his servants, distorted the truth, so they can protect themselves and their evil empires from the backlash of the innocent people, who continue to be sadly deceived. Once again, we find the missing instructions to the vague 3-letter commandment of Exodus 20 verse 15, do not steal, hidden in the text of Exodus 22, laws about repayment. If someone steals a cow or a sheep and kills it or sells it, he must pay 5 cows for 1 cow and 4 sheep for 1 sheep. He must pay for what he stole. If he owns nothing, he shall be sold as a slave to pay for what he has stolen. If the stolen animal, whether a cow, a donkey, or a sheep, is found alive in his possession, he shall pay 2 for 1. If a thief is caught breaking into a house at night and is killed, the one who killed him is not guilty of murder. But if it happens during the day, he is guilty of murder. If someone lets his animal graze in a field or a vineyard, and they stray away and eat up the crops growing in someone else's field, he must make good the loss with the crops from his own fields or vineyards. If someone starts a fire in his own field and it spreads through the weeds to someone else's field and burns up grain that is growing or that has been cut and stacked, the one who started the fire is to pay for the damage. If anyone agrees to keep someone else's money or other valuables for him, and they are stolen from his house, the thief, if found, shall repay double. But if the thief is not found, the one who was keeping the valuables is to be brought to the place of worship, and there he must take an oath that he has not stolen the other one's property. In every case, a dispute about property, whether it involves cattle, donkeys, sheep, clothing, or any other lost object, the two people claiming the property shall be taken to the place of worship. The one whom God declares the guilty shall pay double to the other one. If anyone agrees to keep someone else's donkey, cow, sheep, or other animal for him, and the animal dies or is injured or is carried off in a raid, and if there was no witness, the man must go to the place of worship and take an oath that he has not stolen the other man's animal. If the animal was not stolen, the owner shall accept the loss, and the other man need not repay him. But if the animal was stolen, the man must repay the owner. If it was killed by wild animals, the man is to bring the remains as evidence. He need not pay for what has been killed by wild animals. If anyone borrows an animal from someone else and it is injured or dies when its owner is not present, he must pay for it. But if that happens when the owner is present, he need not repay. If it is a rented animal, the loss is covered by the rental price. Here are some more verses about stealing. What is ironic is that we see the false disciple Paul preaching against stealing in Ephesians 4 verse 28. If you used to rob, you must stop robbing and start working in order to earn an honest living for yourself and to be able to help the poor. And then confessing to stealing in the damning verse of 2 Corinthians 11 verse 8. I robbed other churches by receiving support from them so as to serve you. Once again, my dear brothers and sisters, we find the missing instructions to the vague commandment, which is also a three-letter word, of Exodus 20 verse 14. Do not commit adultery. Hidden in Exodus 20 verse 17. Do not desire another man's house. Do not desire his wife, his slaves, his cattle, his donkeys, or anything else that he owns. Exodus 22 verses 16 to 19. Moral and religious laws. If a man seduces a virgin who is not engaged, he must pay the bride price for her and marry her. But if her father refuses to let him marry her, he must pay the father a sum of money equal to the bride price for a virgin. Put to death any woman who practices magic. Above verse is clearly corrupted, for it should be anyone, as written in Malachi 3 verse 5 and Revelations 22 verse 15. Put to death any man who has sexual relations with an animal. The following verse is missing from the above instructions. Leviticus 20 verse 13. If a man has sexual relations with another man, they have done a disgusting thing, and both shall be put to death. They are responsible for their own death. As Paul ironically attests to in 1 Corinthians 6, verses 9 to 10. Or do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor homosexuals, nor thieves, nor the covetous, nor drunkards, nor revelers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God. An epic example of the above damning law is the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, where we find the above sin evident in Genesis 19, verses 4 to 7. Here are more verses in the Bible about fornication. We find the missing text to the vague commandment of Exodus 20, verse 16. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbour. Hidden in Exodus 23, verses 1 to 8. Do not spread false rumours, and do not help a guilty person by giving false testimony. Do not follow the majority when they do wrong, or when they give testimony that perverts justice. Do not show partiality to a poor person at his trial. If you happen to see your enemy's cow or donkey running loose, take it back to him. If his donkey has fallen under its load, help him get the donkey to its feet again. Don't just walk off. Do not deny justice to a poor person when he appears in court. Do not make false accusations, and do not put an innocent person to death, for I will condemn you. For I will condemn anyone who does such an evil thing. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe makes people blind to what is right and ruins the cause of those who are innocent. Here are more verses in the Bible about bearing false witness and about lying. One of the 10 Commandments, Exodus 22, 29 to 30. Do not hold back offerings from your granaries or your vats. You must give me the firstborn of your sons. Do the same with your cattle and your sheep. Let them stay with their mothers for 7 days, but give them to me on the 8th day. Which is reiterated, my dear brothers and sisters, in Exodus 34, verses 19 to 20. Every firstborn son and firstborn male domestic animal belongs to me, but you are to buy back every firstborn donkey by offering a lamb in its place. If you do not buy it back, break its neck. Buy back every firstborn son. No one is to appear before me without an offering. The source and instruction, my dear brothers and sisters, of the above commandment came in Exodus 13, 1 to 2. Consecration of the firstborn. The Lord said to Moses, consecrate to me every firstborn male, the first offspring of every womb among the Israelites belongs to me, whether human or animal. And verse 12 and 13. If you are to give over to the Lord the first offering of every womb, all the firstborn males of your livestock belong to the Lord. Redeem with a lamb every firstborn donkey, but if you do not redeem it, break its neck. Redeem every firstborn among your sons. Reason for above commandment. Knowing too well it was the terrorist Pharaoh that first put out a decree to kill all the male firstborns of Israel. As we can see in the following information, we find our great God avenging the Israelites in Exodus 11 verses 4 to 7. So Moses said, this is what the Lord says, about midnight I will go throughout Egypt. Every firstborn son in Egypt will die, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh who sits on the throne, to the firstborn son of the female slave, who is at her handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well. There will be loud wailing throughout Egypt, worse than there has ever been or ever will be again. But among the Israelites, not a dog will bark at any person or animal. Then you will know that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. Exodus 12, verse 29. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborns in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well. Exodus 13, verses 11 to 16. And it shall be, when the Lord shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore unto thee and to thy fathers, and shall give it thee, that thou shalt set apart unto the Lord all that openeth the matrix, and every firstling that comes of a beast which thou hast, the males shall be the Lord's. And every firstling of an ass thou shalt redeem with a lamb, and if thou wilt not redeem it, then thou shalt break his neck. And all the firstborn of man among thy children shalt thou redeem. And it shall be, when thy son asks thee in a time to come, saying, What is this? That thou shalt say unto him, By strength of hand the Lord brought us out from Egypt, from the house of bondage. And it came to pass, when Pharaoh would hardly let us go, that the Lord slew all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore I sacrificed to the Lord all that openeth the matrix, being males, but all the firstborn of my children I redeem. And it shall be for a token upon thy hand, and for frontlets between thine eyes. For by strength of hand the Lord brought us forth out of Egypt. The above is the first time male Israelites appear before the Lord. He is early proof of the above commandment in the Torah. Genesis 4, verse 4. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favour on Abel and his offering. And Genesis 22, verse 13. Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. Exodus 23, verses 14 to 15. The three great festivals. Celebrate 3 festivals a year to honor me. In the month of Aviv, the month in which you left Egypt, celebrate the festival of unleavened bread in the way that I commanded you. Do not eat any bread made with yeast during the 7 days of this festival. Never come to worship me without bringing an offering, which is reiterated in Exodus 34, verse 18. Celebrate the festival of the unleavened bread. For 7 days eat bread made without yeast, as I commanded you. Do this at the appointed time of the month of Abib, for in that month you came out of Egypt. You notice something very interesting, my dear brothers and sisters. The celebration of the festival of the unleavened bread is clearly not the body of Christ. The source and instruction for the above commandment we have just expressed is found in Exodus 12, verses 1 to 26. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, This month is to be for you the first month of your year. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. If any household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share one with their nearest neighbour, having taken into account the number of people there are. You are to determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat. The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect, and you may take them from the sheep or the goats. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the members of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the houses where they eat the lambs. That same night they are to eat the meat roasted over the fire, along with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not eat the meat raw or boiled in water, but roast it over a fire with the head, legs and internal organs. Do not leave any of it till morning. If some is left till morning, you must burn it. This is how you are to eat it, with your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. On that same night I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn of both people and animals, and I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. This is the day you are to commemorate for the generations to come. You shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord, a lasting ordinance. For 7 days you are to eat bread made without yeast. On the first day remove the yeast from your houses. For whoever eats anything with yeast in it, from the first day through the 7th, must be cut off from Israel. On the first day hold a sacred assembly, and another one on the 7th day. Do not work at all on these days, except to prepare food for everyone to eat. This is all you may do. Celebrate the feast of the unleavened bread, because it was on this day that I brought your divisions out of Egypt. Celebrate this day as a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. In the first month you are to eat bread made without yeast, from the evening of the 14th day until the evening of the 21st day. For 7 days no yeast is to be found in your houses, and anyone, whether foreigner or native born, who eats anything with yeast in it must be cut off from the community of Israel. Eat nothing made with yeast. Wherever you live, you must eat unleavened bread. We can see clearly that this has absolutely nothing to do with the body of Jesus. Exodus 12, verses 21 to 28. Then Moses called together all of Israel's elders and said to them, Go pick out one of the flock for your families and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop, dig it into the blood that is in the bowl, and touch the beam above the door and the 2 doorposts with the blood in the bowl. None of you should go out the door of your house until morning, when the Lord comes by to strike down the Egyptians, and sees the blood on the beam above the door and on the 2 doorposts. The Lord will pass over that door. He won't let the destroyer enter your houses to strike you down. You should observe this ritual as a regulation for all time for you and your children. When you enter the land that the Lord has promised to give you, be sure that you observe this ritual. And when your children ask you, what does this ritual mean to you? You will say it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord. For the Lord passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt. When he struck down the Egyptians, he spared our houses. The people then bowed down and worshipped. The Israelites went and did exactly what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron to do.
It is to the same belief of salvation that blessed Jesus placed his full trust in the one true God by instructing his disciples to follow the exact commandment of celebrating the festival of the unleavened bread, known as the Passover. In Luke 22, verse 18, Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, "Go and make preparations for us to eat the Passover." And Mark 14, verse 12, on the first day of unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb was being sacrificed, his disciples said to him, "Where do you want us to go and prepare for you to eat the Passover?"
Exodus 12, verses 40 to 50. The length of time that the Israelites had lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of 430 years, on that precise day, all the Lord's people in military formation left the land of Egypt. For the Lord, that was a night of intent watching to bring them out of the land of Egypt. For all Israelites in every generation, this same night is a time of intent watching to honor the Lord. Instructions for observing Passover. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "This is the regulation for the Passover. No foreigner may eat it. However, any slave who has been bought may eat it after he's been circumcised. No temporary foreign resident or day labourer may eat it. It should be eaten in one house. You shouldn't take any of the meat outside the house, and you shouldn't break the bones." The whole Israelite community should observe it. If an immigrant who lives with you wants to observe the Passover to the Lord, then he and all his males should be circumcised. Then he may join in observing it. He should be regarded as a native of the land, but no uncircumcised person may eat it. There will be one instruction for the native and for the immigrant who lives with you. All the Israelites did just as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. On that precise day, the Lord brought the Israelites out of the land of Egypt in military formation. Exodus 13, verses 3 to 10. Moses said to the people, "Remember this day, which is the day that you came out of Egypt, out of the place you were slaves, because the Lord acted with power to bring you out of there. No leavened bread may be eaten. Today, in the month of Aviv, which is in Arabic Abib, you are going to live. The Lord will bring you to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. It is the land that the Lord promised your ancestors to give to you, a land full of milk and honey. You should perform this ritual in this month. You must eat unleavened bread for 7 days. The 7th day is a festival to the Lord. Only unleavened bread should be eaten for 7 days. No leavened bread and no yeast should be seen among you in your whole country. You should explain to your child on that day, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. Not as the Christians have falsely believed about Jesus and his sacrifice. It will be a sign on your hand and a reminder on your forehead, so that you will often discuss the Lord's instruction. For the Lord brought you out of Egypt with great power. So you should follow this regulation at its appointed time every year. Exodus 23, 14 to 15. Second commandment, and second time males appear before the Lord. Here is some proof of the above commandment in the Torah. Numbers 9, 1 to 5. Numbers 28, verse 6. Deuteronomy 1, verse 3. Deuteronomy 16, verses 1 to 2. Joshua 5, verse 10. And Luke 2, 21. The missing commandment of circumcision, its source and instruction. Genesis 17, 9 to 14. God said to Abraham, "You also must agree to keep the covenant with me. both you and your descendants in future generations. You and your descendants must all agree to circumcise every male among you. From now on, you must circumcise every baby boy when he is 8 days old, including slaves born in your homes and slaves bought from foreigners. This will show that there is a covenant between you and me. Each one must be circumcised, and this will be a physical sign to show that my covenant with you is everlasting. Any male who has not been circumcised will no longer be considered one of my people, because he has not kept the covenant with me. How many Christians, my dear brothers and sisters, and Gentiles have been circumcised? The missing instructions to the above are found in Leviticus 12, verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If a woman have conceived seed, and born a man-child, then she shall be unclean 7 days, according to the days of the separation. For her infirmity shall she be unclean. And in the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised, and he shall then continue in the blood of her, purifying thee 33 days. She shall touch no hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary, until the days of her purifying be fulfilled. But if she bears a maid child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her separation, and she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 66 days. And when the days of her purifying are fulfilled, for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring a lamb of the first year for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering, unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, unto the priest, who shall offer it before the Lord, and make an atonement for her, and she shall be cleansed from the issue of her blood. This is the law for her that hath borne a male or a female. And if she not be able to bring forth a lamb, then she shall bring 2 turtles or 2 young pigeons, the one for the burnt offering, and the other for a sin offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for her, and she shall be clean. The above, my dear brothers and sisters, came to fruition in Luke 2:21. On the 8th day, when it was time to circumcise him, he was named Jesus, the name the angel had given him before he had been conceived. And Luke 2:24, and to offer a sacrifice in keeping with what is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of doves or 2 young pigeons. This is the 3rd time males appear in front of God as commanded in Exodus 34 verse 23. 3 times a year all your men are to appear before the sovereign Lord, the God of Israel. Commandment, Exodus 20 verses 8 to 11. Observe the Sabbath and keep it holy. You have 6 days in which to do your work, but the 7th day is a day of rest, dedicated to me. On that day no one is to work, neither you, your children, your slaves, your animals, nor the foreigners who live in your country. In the 6th day I, the Lord, made the earth, the skies, and everything in them. But on the 7th day I did not rest. It was Adam. That is why I, the Lord, blessed the Sabbath and made it holy. As reiterated in Exodus 23 verses 10 to 12. For 6 years plant your land and gather in what it produces, but in the 7th year let it rest, and do not harvest anything that grows on it. The poor may eat what grows there, and the wild animals can have what is left. Do the same with your vineyards and your olive trees. Work 6 days a week, but do not work on the seventh day, so that your slaves and the foreigners who work for you, and even your animals, can rest, just like Adam rested in paradise. And Exodus 34, verse 21. You have 6 days in which to do your work, but do not work on the seventh day, not even during plowing time or harvest. Once again, we find that unlike the church that claimed to follow Paul, Paul did in fact observe the Sabbath in the following. Missing commandment. Exodus 23, verse 9. Do not oppress a foreigner. We find the instructions of the above commandment, my dear brothers and sisters, hidden in Exodus 22, verses 22 to 28. Do not mistreat any widow or orphan. If you do, I, the Lord, will answer them when they cry out to me for help, and I will become angry and kill you in war. Your wives will become widows, and your children will be fatherless. If you lend money to any of my people who are poor, do not act like a money lender and require him to pay interest. If you take someone's cloak as a pledge that he will pay you, you must give it back to him before the sun sets, because it is the only covering he has to keep him warm. What else can he sleep in? When he cries out to me for help, I will answer him, because I am merciful. Missing commandment. Exodus 22, verse 25. Do not lend money with interest, which is further consolidated in Leviticus 25, verse 35. Loans to the poor. If any Israelites living near you become poor and cannot support themselves, you must provide for them as you would for a hired worker, so that they can continue to live near you. Do not charge Israelites any interest, but obey God and let them live near you. Do not make them pay interest on the money you lend them, and do not make a profit on the food you sell them. This is the command of the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt in order to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. Here are more verses about lending, and we find the above commandments clearly reiterated in all of the following. Exodus 28, instructions for the priest's clothing. Summon to you your brother Aaron and his sons from among the Israelites to serve me as priests. Aaron and Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, and Eleazar and Ithamar, make holy clothing that will give honor and dignity to your brother Aaron. Tell all who are skilled, to whom I have given special abilities, to make clothing for Aaron for his dedication to serve me as a priest. Listen carefully, my dear brothers and sisters, and listen you, the ignorant world, to the following words that are clear instruction from our Almighty God. Bless his name forever. These are the articles of clothing that they should make: a chest pendant, a vest, a robe, a woven tunic, a turban, I repeat, a turban, and a sash. When they make this holy clothing for your brother Aaron and his sons to serve me as priests, they should use gold, blue, purple, and deep red yarns and fine linen. Weave the tunic out of fine linen. Make the turban, I repeat, make the turban out of fine linen. Make a sash decorated with the needlework. For Aaron's sons should also make tunics, sashes, and turbans to mark their honor and dignity. Put these garments on your brother Aaron and on his sons with him. Anoint them with oil, ordain them, and make them holy to serve me as priests. You should also make linen undergarments for them to cover their naked skin from the hips to the thighs. If there is any word that strongly stood out in the last 2 chapters, my dear brothers and sisters, then it would be the shockingly surprising word of turban that first appeared in Exodus 28 verse 4. I had to wash my face 3 times before making sure it was indeed in the above text. And if that was not enough, I went to the interpretation of the word to make sure this is the same word that was in question. This, my dear brothers and sisters, is what I derived. Turban. A head covering that is worn especially by men in some parts of the Middle East and in southern Asia, and that is made of a long cloth wrapped around the head. Full definition of turban. A headdress worn chiefly in countries of the Eastern Mediterranean and Southern Asia, consisting of a long cloth that is wrapped around the cap, as by Muslims, or directly around the head, as by Sikhs and Hindus. Take a look, my dear brothers and sisters, at some of the Muslims that wore a turban, and from the Torah and Bible itself. Exodus 29 verse 6. And you shall set the turban on his head and put the holy crown on the turban. Leviticus 8 verse 9. He also placed the turban on his head, and on the turban at its front he placed the golden plate, the holy crown, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. Leviticus 16 verse 4. He shall put on the holy linen tunic, and the linen undergarments shall be next to his body, and he shall be girded with the linen sash, and attired with the linen turban. These are the holy garments. Then he shall bathe his body in water and put them on. Zechariah 3 verse 5. Then I said, let them put a clean turban on his head. So they put a clean turban on his head and clothed him with garments, while the angel of the Lord was standing by. Ezekiel 21 25 to 26. And you, O slain wicked one, the prince of Israel, whose day has come in the time of the punishment of the end. Thus says the Lord God, remove the turban and take off the crown. This will no longer be the same exalt, that which is low and abase, that which is high. 2 Kings 11:12. Then he brought the king's son out and put the crown on him and gave him the testimony. And they made him king and anointed him. And they clapped their hands and said, long live the king. 2 Chronicles 23 verse 11. Then they brought the king's son and put the crown on him and gave him the testimony and made him king. And Jehoiada and his sons anointed him and said, long live the king. Revelations 14 verse 14. Then I looked and behold, a white cloud, and sitting on the cloud was one like a son of man, having a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. 1 Samuel 17 verse 5. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was clothed with scale armor, which weighed 5,000 shekels of bronze. Ezekiel 23 verse 15. Girded with belts on their loins, with flowing turbans on their heads, all of them looking like officers, like the Babylonians in Chaldea, the land of their birth. Ezekiel 27 verse 10. Persia and Lud and Put were in your army, your men of war. They hung shield and helmet in you. They set forth your splendor. 2 Samuel 15 verse 30. And David went up the ascent of the Mount of Olives, and wept as he went, and his head was covered, and he walked barefoot. Then all the people who were with him each covered his head, and went up weeping as they went. Ezekiel 24 verse 17. Groan slightly, and make no mourning for the dead. Bind on your turban, and put your shoes on your feet. And do not cover your moustache, and do not eat the bread of men. Job 29 verse 14. I put on righteousness, and he clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a turban.
As we have just derived from the previous verse, the concept of head covering was not only decreed upon the men, but also the women, as is clearly written in 1 Corinthians 11 verse 6. For if a woman does not cover her head, she might as well have her hair cut off. But if it is a disgrace for a woman to have her hair cut off or her head shaved, then she should cover her head. Why do the Gentiles, especially the Christians, protest against the hijab when our Holy Mother, the Virgin Mary, wore not only a head covering herself, but a full body cover, as can be depicted in all of her images?
Now take a look at some of the pictures of a turban. Take special note of the deceit planted in the history of the turban and its time frame, when we have just produced its origins and from the Torah itself. The origins of the turban are uncertain. Early Persians in modern Iran and Frisians in modern Turkey wore a conical cap. Frisian cap, encircled by hands of cloth, which historians have suggested was developed to become the modern turban. But other theories suggest it was first widely worn in Egypt. An early attestation for knowledge of the turban is found in the Roman author Ovid's Metamorphoses, dating to the 1st century. Ovid recounts the myth that Midas, king of the Frisians, an Indo-European people of central Turkey, wore a royal purple turban to cover his donkey ears. There is not much more deceit than this, my dear brothers and sisters. A style of turban called aphekolis continued to be worn in that region by soldiers of the Byzantine army in the period 400 to 600, as well as the Byzantine civilians as depicted in Greek frescoes from the 10th century in the province of Cappadocia in modern Turkey, where it was still worn by their Greek-speaking descendants in the early 20th century. The Islamic prophet Muhammad, who lived 570 to 632, is believed to have worn a turban in white, the most holy color. Many Muslim men choose to wear green because it represents paradise, especially among followers of Sufism. In parts of North Africa, where blue is common, the shade of a turban can signify the tribe of the wearer. The deceit we just have read is a complete ignorance of the truth of the instructions we have just covered, my dear brothers and sisters. So from what we can gather from all the damning verses in the Torah and Bible is that all of God's prophets, including Jesus, indeed wore turbans, just like Muhammad did. How many popes, rabbis and priests you and I know have followed the commandments of God and worn the turban, just like Aaron and his sons and all the priests in Exodus 28 verse 40. What is tragic for the devil and his servants, my dear brothers and sisters, is that Gog and Magog wore turbans themselves, as can clearly be ascertained from the following damning picture. The above picture, my dear brothers and sisters, once again tragically exposes the deceit of the devil and his servants, the Antichrist Church, Romans, and false Pharisees.
In a further blow to the false Pharisees, scribes, scholars, and historians, we can find damning illustrated evidence throughout the Payne family Bible of the turban and its origin, which dates all the way back to the Chaldean Babylonian era, as testified to in Ezekiel 23, verse 15, with belts around their waists and flowing turbans on their heads. All of them look like Babylonian chariot officers, natives of Chaldea.
All of the above commandments can be summed up by one verse. Our teacher Jesus stated in the damning text of Matthew 5, verses 17 to 20. For we know too well by now that it was our only teacher Jesus, along with the Holy Spirit, the angel Gabriel, that passed down the law and all of God's messages to the prophets. From the explosive text of Acts 7:38. He is the one who was with the people of Israel assembled in the desert. He was there with our ancestors and with the angel who spoke to him on Mount Sinai, and he received God's living messages to pass on to us. And Acts 7:53. You are the ones who received God's law that was handed down by angels, yet you have not obeyed it. Ironically, my dear brothers and sisters, it is the hypocrite Paul who gives testimony to the truth of the law in the following. What is ironic is that the Antichrist Church has not followed any of God's commandments, nor adhered to the teachings of our teacher, for he clearly prophesied against them in John 7:49. No, but this mob that knows nothing of the law, there is a curse on them. In Matthew 12, verse 30, whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters.
And that concludes part 9 of this video series. In our next video, entitled The Real Jesus, you will find a dire message for all of humanity, especially its Christians, that seriously exposes the deceit they have all been bought into. Watch as Jesus reveals to our world his true identity, and from his own lips that once again destroys the concept of the Trinity and a deceitful claim that he was crucified, as amazingly testified to by Satan himself. Stop, listen, and cross-examine the overwhelming, damning evidence that exposes the false teachings of the clergy and scholars, who have built their empires on selling made-up stories and lies.